Now gather round while I elucidate on what happens outside.
Hi, my name is Aaron Collins, and you are watching Paranormal Crossings. And I have invited a few of my friends to be on the panel today. And so we will start with some introductions. This is the Halloween special for Paranormal Crossings, and I've got an all-star guest panel today. So we're going to start to my right, all the way to my right, and this is Michael Jones.
I'm with the Shanghai Tunnels, the infamous Portland Underground.
Woohoo! Yes. All right. And then we have Tish Paquette.
Yes, hello. I'm an intuitive, and I have a business called Emergence Readings and Reiki.
Woohoo! Yes. Then we have Seth Michael to my immediate right.
Right, yeah. I am a psychic medium and also on the team White Lake Paranormal Insight.
All right.
Yes.
Got that on.
And to my left is Rocky Smith.
I'm with Northwest Ghost Tours, and I'm also the director of the Oregon Ghost Conference.
Woohoo! And to his left, we have Jeff Davis.
I write books on the paranormal, do historic research, and generally get in people's way.
And then we have, last but not least, June Lundgren.
Hi, I'm June Lundgren. I'm a psychic medium and author. I'm also on the Northwest Paranormal Investigative Team.
Woohoo! All right, and for those of you that may not know, we are filming this in front of a live studio audience, so I want to thank you all for being here and taking your time to come and watch us and listen to these wonderful people that I've invited today. So thank you so much. So, it's my turn. So we're going to get to Michael Jones first. So, Mr. Jones, you are representing the Shanghai Tunnels. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Shanghai Tunnels and tell us what just came out regarding the most haunted places in Oregon. Where do you stand in that?
Well, the Shanghai Tunnels is something I've been involved with since I was 7. It was many, many years ago when I first went underground. An old sea captain took me in, and I became hooked. And since that day, I've been, anytime I could, I would get underground, talk to a lot of old timers. People befriended me and told me things they wouldn't tell anyone else. I was the question boy. Now I'm the question man, asked a lot of questions. This is a lot of oral history that is fascinating but also very tragic, because the Shanghaian of people was not a good part of Portland's past. And along with the Shanghai of men, there was the white slavery, what we call today human trafficking, and fascinating history, but horrific history. And that's why the Portland Underground is just been designated by InYourOwnState.com as the #1 haunted place in Oregon.
Ooh. Yes.
I would believe that.
Yes.
And when people come on our guided tours, we don't promise anything's going to happen. We don't make anything happen, but things do happen. And people leave there very different. Some people, like psychic mediums, or a lot of them cannot be in the underground very long because they pick up the tragedy that's happened there, and it is overwhelming. I remember being with a tour not too long ago. Everybody was had some type of abilities to sense spirits and things like that, and there was a couple people, they had to practically drag them through there to finish the tour. They just couldn't handle it. People would go into the underground and all of a sudden start crying because they pick up on the tragedies that's happened there. Portland's a very unique place, always has been. There was an old saying that is very alive and well today. What the good citizens of Portland do not see, supposedly didn't happen. Everything was done underground. Victims were locked up in holding cells, kept there until the sea captains wanted them, which was just before they were ready to leave port. And they would drug them, bring them out through the underground to the waterfront, put them aboard ship, and collect $50 blood money. It was a lot of money back then. That stopped in the 1940s because of the World War II. And the effects of what happened there is still there. It is very haunted. I don't really like that term. I think the best term is what has happened has imprinted itself on that underground network. And we just recently got into a new section. We're not finished with it. It's going to be another year. But we have started bringing certain tours down there. And I tell you, last night, I got affected. What I was seeing and what was happening. And, you know, there's nothing bad that happens. What happens is you see, well, I thought it was a lady in white. Well, I didn't know it was a lady in white. I thought it was one of our volunteers. And I said, you were just over there, weren't you? No. Well, the lady in white, she's probably the spirit that we see the most. Wears a long white dress, she has white shoes, has blonde hair down to her shoulders, she's slender, and she's sighted all the time. And in the new section, that's the first time I was able to see her. And you know, I'm not used to this. You know, I've been in the underground, you know, over 50 years now. And when things like this happen, I'm not used to it. People who work with me realize if I freeze, I can't talk. That means start taking pictures around me, something's going on. Other times, you know, when we see apparitions, it's not in a fog or glowing, it's like you and I. And that really gets to me because I'll be talking to these people that aren't there, and one of the volunteers will come and say, "Who are you talking to?" I said, "The two ladies in the black dress behind me." "Michael, there's nobody there. Everybody's still in the other section." You know, so it happens, you know, and I'm always doubting myself, and it's like on my research, I always doubt my research. I want to learn more and more and more, and always want to learn more about the spirits in the underground. And we really respect the spirits and the underground itself, because some people made some jokes about it, and you know, the victimization, the overwhelming victimization that families feel, what happened to their relatives, is still overwhelming today. And when we have people come through who had a relative that was shanghaied, I dread that because I know what's going to happen. They'll start out very happy, and as the tour goes on, they'll slide down into this depression because realizing this probably what happened to my relative. You know, and and when people start crying in the underground, you know, they really understand what happened here. You know, it's fascinating history, but horrible, tragic history. I have a good friend from Warm Springs that just has come through 4 times, and learned a lot from him and how the Native Americans were affected by this. They were prime targets for the Shanghaiers because they were great aboard ship. And he went on the tour, and afterwards, he did 2 ceremonies in 2 different areas. One was by the opium den. And I looked at him, and he's doing this ceremony, and he knows I want to ask questions, because I asked a lot of questions. And finally, when he was through, he said, "This is where I feel the dead people, the dead Indians, who died for giving the disease blankets." And he explained that for Portland to occupy that area along the Willamette, they had to get rid of the native people who were there. So they gave them disease blankets. And he says, "This is where I feel it the most." In another section, which we call by the Wolfhead Tunnel, he did another ceremony there, and he said native people from all over the underground, not just in the 4 buildings we're in, but all over. He could see them coming out of the walls towards him and listening. And this is the first time that they had heard someone sing this native song since they had passed on. And the feeling in the underground was heavy, but also it was almost joyous because somebody came back who understood what was going on. You never know what's going to happen in the underground. You don't make things happen. They happen when they happen. And I never have gotten used to it.
It's an amazing place. Have any of you guys out there been to the Shanghai tunnels? Raise a hand. That place is amazing, and when Michael says, you know, they don't make things happen, I mean, they don't. They have, the thing that I love about you and your tour guides is that you have the utmost respect. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important, not to go in and taunt and, you know, and make fun of or whatever to get reactions. You go down there with all the respect, which I think is absolutely wonderful. But things do happen, and I went, and things happened to me down there. The group, took 18 or 20 of us down there. Michael kept saying, he's been on my show several times, he said, you gotta come down. I hadn't even been down yet. So we went down, and one of the girls, one of my kids' little girlfriend was with us, and when we walked out of the tunnels, she had little child handprints on her jeans. Other things that happened was I saw the lady in white, and again, I thought that was a tour guide. So I'm listening to Michael speak and talk and everything. I see this woman peeking around this corner, and she's all in white, and I thought, well, maybe they have somebody in costume. Again, I had never been down there before. So then I realized she came back and she stood in this doorway while Michael was talking, and I realized she didn't have any feet. I'm like, okay. Then I just kind of kept it to myself and thought, well, I don't have any feet. So there's a lot of things that happen, and then there's times that things don't happen. And I think the important thing is to go down there with respect. And I encourage you to go take a tour down there if you can, and see what it's about. And the other thing about Michael is, I know this is all paranormal, but this also leads to you being an advocate for human trafficking awareness, which we've done a lot of projects, film projects on. So we'll have you touch on that here in just a little bit. So, and then Tish, wonderful Tish. So Tish has a knack of, when you go and see Tish in her office, and you plan for an hour, hour and a half, 6 hours later, I kid you not, I don't know, I can't explain it. And it feels like you haven't been in there for 6 hours, but oh my gosh, time stops while you're in there. And you're just an amazing person. I can go on and on and on about you, but tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
I appreciate that. Yes, well, if you come to see me, I work with you on your body, mind, and spirit. Sometimes ancestors will come through, your angels will come through. I'm also a medical intuitive, so I assess your chakras and what's going on with you. Sometimes animals come through. One time I had an alligator come through, and that was very interesting. And the people I did the reading on said, "Oh yeah, Grandma used to always warn us about the alligators and the signs," and that. So they knew exactly what that was about. Which you never know what you're going to get, like with anything in paranormal. You just don't. I'll get names, and the interpretation of the information is always challenging. But you trust it. And I know that even though they might not know that name, they will call me later and say, I remember who that is. But primarily, I had the privilege of going to the tunnels and be with Michael. And I didn't know about anything he did. We had just met. And so I'm walking through the tunnels, and all of a sudden, Michael says, "Are you getting anything?" And it's like, oh yeah, and I'm on this side of this partition, and I go, I don't like it here. There's women screaming. This is very uncomfortable for me. And he had me walk around, and he opened the door, and he said, this is where they keep them to break their spirit. And it's just a small cubicle, a chair where their hands are tied. And as soon as you said break their spirit, I heard the female say, they didn't break mine. And then another female voice said, tell him, thank you for the work that you're doing. And I didn't know what he did at the time, and I shared that information, and it was like the human trafficking.
So how does that make, excuse me just a second, how does that make you feel?
It gets to me.
Yeah.
We get a lot of criticism because this is oral history, and it's just something that, you know, I have no choice but to do what I've been
Chosen. You've been chosen.
chosen.
to
I
do
guess
this.
I'm chosen, but you know, when you see the abuse, whether it's in the past or present, you have to do something. I have a conscience, you know. I just feel that, you know, if you have a chance to make a difference, you have to do it. That's the way I've always been. That's how I was raised, and you know, it makes me feel good, you know, because I'm just always worried that, you know, there's this balance. You're bringing people into the underground, you know, you're trying to educate them, and you know, people have a good time, but it's also, again, it's a tragic history. And when Tish came through, she was telling me things. Well, she didn't know anything about it, and what she was telling me, she knew what she was talking about, but only I would know that, and so it really got to me, you know. And it was very, very nice when you gave me some feedback, because I am not a paranormal investigator. I'm a historian, folklorist, educator, who's around a lot of paranormal stuff, and things happen to me.
He hangs with a lot of paranormal.
So it's good to know we're doing the right things, and it's not just me. It's great volunteers and people who contribute in little ways that really all adds up, and that's why we've been able to make the progress we've made.
And then now you said you heard the women screaming, and then you heard her say, "But I didn't. They didn't break my spirit."
Right.
Did you also feel? Did you feel their emotions? Did you
Oh,
feel?
yes.
Did you?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what's that like for you to feel and hear that type of?
It's difficult to separate theirs and yours, and you always have to be careful that this isn't just you feeding in. But I could sense it when I was walking around, and I could start feeling it building, and then hearing. And I know it's not mine, so I know it's theirs. And it was tragic. I wanted to escape. There were several times in the tunnel where I just wanted breath, just wanted to know that there was a way out and that there was fresh air. But they were so insistent to get the information to Michael. And almost, when they were done, it was almost like this hopeful comment that something's going to be done. And that was kind of how that part ended.
Wow.
But had to move off of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know for me, being down there, I just felt oppressive. There was no happy feeling when I was down there. I was very intrigued by the history, you know, and listening, and to be able to see where these people, you know, some ended their lives there. And so there's a lot of tragic history down there, but the feeling is definitely not joyous and wonderful. And so and that's why I like working with psychic mediums when I go on investigations, because yes, our biggest tool, and I have always felt in doing an investigation, is our bodies. We can have all the electronic tools out there, but really our number one tool is our body. Let your body tell you what's good, what's bad, you know, that type of thing. And so, and then I use psychic mediums to go above and beyond that and explain a little more. And so that's always, I've always felt that fascinating and very helpful in doing an investigation, and even when not doing an investigation. So I always ask these two all kinds of stuff all the time. Call them. So thank you, Tish.
Thank you.
Seth, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm a psychic medium too, and huge empath, so I can really relate. And I have went in the tunnels, and I'm glad you said that about some people can't take it. I can't either. I have to stay upstairs when my girlfriend wants to go.
Wow.
And even up there, there's some things that are float up, I guess you could say. So I have a private office at my girlfriend's salon, the Wild Hair in Camas, and I'm not doing a plug, am I? She has great hair. And
Just don't tell anybody I had my hair done there.
no, exactly. I give a free service there. I'll let people know how their hair is going to look before they get it done.
Oh, there you go.
It's always fabulous. So I also do phone readings. I work with like I said, White Lake Paranormal Insight. And
You guys know what
See, I'm not alone.
yeah, I know.
I got it right. I got it right.
White Lightning.
Yeah,
I've heard it called that before. It's a pretty cool superhero name. So I do that. I do a radio show with somebody who's in the audience right now. It's Teresa Cleve, who's also a psychic medium. And we do Into the Light with Seth, Michael, and Teresa Cleve. Wonderful. Also, I might be forgetting things. My whole life is based on, I guess, the other side. And sometimes the balance gets a little difficult. So it's rare where I'm doing something just regularly human. I guess I don't know how else to say that. Where I'm not connecting. It is. I don't. Even just on a normal level, I think once we're familiar with it, we're just automatically there. I think most people. So
how does that affect your everyday relationship? You know, relationship with girlfriend, relationship with family, friends. I mean, how do you separate, or do you?
I do the best I can with that, yeah. But the empath comes in a lot, the feelings. So if someone's upset, then I'll feel that. And I learned a lot of tools and how to separate that. That was very important that I did, because a lot of my life I didn't. And so I even had a diagnosis with the overwhelming emotions. And you talked about that.
Wow.
And because I agree that some people don't know, like some people are just so automatically open and not having a filter and not learning about it. And it's just crazy. You know, you don't know who is who, what is what. And even if you're alone in the room and somebody gets angry, they're not always understanding that might be a spirit giving off that energy, or we're just sucking it in. So I learned a lot of tools and how to be real cognitive with it the best I can. Wow. So, but I'm also very grateful that I have that empath challenge, because it helps me a lot with what I've been really drawn to, is helping, when they're open to it, earthbound spirits. So the part of the consciousness that's still anchored. There might be resentments or guilt, or sometimes they're afraid they can't come back. Like you know, or they're afraid of going to hell, or just all kinds of different situations, and dependent on the person. So I learned, but when I was little, I remember my mom was so cool, and I know my friends have heard this over and over about imaginary friends, because I had a bunch of them, but they would change when we moved to houses. But my mom, she was real good with that. She would set places at the table, and I would talk to them, and she never said stop that or anything. But she didn't know they were spirits, and I didn't either. But I think at the time it would have been difficult because we didn't have the tools. So I think just calling an imagination was comfortable, and I learned in my 20s that probably wasn't my imagination. And I remember thinking back, like for me, most of it comes in on the right side of my brain, and or my head. So when I think back, I believe that that's where that was starting to open more. So and then I learned about the crossing. And not every spirit's ready or anything like that. And I'm not drawn to help every single spirit or anything. It's just, I guess, an intuitive thing. It just I have a feel, okay, this is what I believe, is that we sort of set things up ahead of time, and a spirit, the soul part might be setting up, okay, you're going to meet Seth. I'm going to meet Seth at this time, because it's time that I hear this certain thing that'll help me go and be whole on that side. So yeah, I really enjoy that. So the emotional difficulty helps me understand, you know, that I had what they're possibly going through, or really close. I mean, because I'm just going to say it in fact, but this is my belief, is that my truth is that I can feel their emotion just as if it's me. And a lot of empaths have described that just like that. So.
Now, well, you know what? I got a million questions, and I'll come back to you for those questions for earlier on. So, Mr. Rocky Smith, tell us a little bit about you and what you're representing.
I'm from Oregon City, and I've lived in Oregon City my whole life. Been very involved in the community, but mostly interested in history. I worked at the Ermitinger House in college and was worked for the city doing tours through the house. And as someone working in a historic house, you would find that people wanted to come in and talk about the ghost stories associated with it. That was very typical throughout Oregon City. I know I met Michael way back then, coming into Oregon City and going through places, and so it was an interest in history that evolved into the paranormal because of the experiences I had in that old house, and a promise that I made to the spirits in the house to take care of it and tell a story, and it basically has taken me the last 15 years working with the city to restore the house fully.
Wow.
And we've spent close to $600,000 restoring the house, and it's a very important place. But that evolved into doing tours in Oregon City on a regular basis, telling stories that most of the people in Oregon City weren't really talking about, and taking my knowledge of Oregon City's history and connecting it to the paranormal stories that are there. And that evolved into the Oregon Ghost Conference. And so I've been working on that, and that's in its 5th year coming up. Ooh. And that's got to meet, I've been able to, thank you.
Yeah, it's really evolved.
It's evolved quite a bit. It's grown, and I had a little heartache moving it, but we're going to move it out of Oregon City for the first time. And this year it will be in Seaside, Oregon, and that'll take place April 1st through the 3rd.
Yes!
It'll be fun, yeah.
I'm not excited or anything. No, and the last year was the first year I was involved, well,
Yeah.
technically this year. And I was blown away. I mean, it's great, because a bunch of us that are in the paranormal field, in one way or another, can get together and swap stories and get to know each other, and it's not a competition, and that's what I like. It's that nobody's in competition with another group or whatever. I mean, you're with White Light Paranormal Insight, and you do your own thing. It's awesome. And so, para-unity is what I've heard it called before. So, but the Ermitinger House, you and I have spoken privately, which that's where I had my first paranormal experience in Oregon. Was at the Ermitinger House, and it blew me away when you first started talking to me about the Ermitinger House, because my story was I had visited the Ermitinger House, and all kinds of things were going on, and I could hear all kinds of noises upstairs, and I asked the lady at the time who was the caretaker, "Who's here?" And she said, "Oh, that's just my ghost." And I go, "What? It's your ghost?" And so anyways, I thought, okay. So anyway, so eventually we end up upstairs, and I ended up staying in this one room. I was intrigued by this point. Now, I'd always had a fascination and intrigue, been intrigued by the paranormal. So I had my first paranormal experience when I was 10. So I started a little young. And when I went up to this one room, I was just drawn to this room for whatever reason.
Which room?
When you go to the top of this, okay, if you're looking from the outside of the house, it's the top right. That's the room that I was originally drawn to.
Okay.
And then it quickly went to the one on the left.
Okay.
And then the bottom, and then, no, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, the entire thing. And one of the things that did happen, and then I'll quickly move on, is the rest of the group was in the other room. The tour guide was doing all, the tour, and I'm just standing in this room, and all of a sudden I see someone, a silhouette of a person sit down in the chair next to this dresser. And at the time, it freaked me out. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I ran to the other room, and I'm like, you will not believe what just happened. And so while I was in this other room, there's hardwood floors throughout the entire house. And which the house was built in, what, 1845?
Well, we're debating that right now. The sign says 1845. We found some evidence that it might be a couple years earlier, but
oh, wow.
40s.
Sheesh, wow. Long time ago, nevertheless. And I could hear and feel the vibration of something heavy scooting across the floor in the other room. Now, we were all in the same room at this point. There was nobody else in this house. So I'm like, okay, I gotta go check this out. So I run to the other room, and sure enough, the chair that the silhouette had sat in was moved to the middle of the room. And the weird thing about that, well, not that that's not weird, right? You can see the skid marks maybe it always happens at your house, I don't know. You can see the skid marks on the floor from the chair sliding across the floor. And right then I was hooked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I'm scared but excited at the same time. What do I do? You know, so,
Adrenaline rush.
yes, and so I had always been drawn since then to that house for various reasons that we won't even go into now, but it's a long story. So, but I appreciate what you've done. I mean, you know, you guys have raised what, 600,000 or put in 600,000.
Well, not necessarily raised.
Well, put in $600,000
yeah.
into renovate the house.
It's the house started collapsing about 5 years ago. And the window panes were falling out of the house. Rain was getting into the house. The city wasn't taking very good care of it at that time. It wasn't a high priority. And what happened was one day some volunteers were working in there, and the second floor of the house slipped about 4 inches.
Wow.
And we closed the house and was essentially condemned. And we got some attention prior to that, getting it on the list of most endangered historic sites in the state, and that helped put focus on the house. The State Preservation Office took notice of that. The local Historic Review Board in Oregon City took issue with that as well and put some pressure on the city. I, of course, was on the city commission at the time and put a lot of pressure on the city. And it evolved into the city making a commitment to put $100,000 a year into the house until it was fixed, and it also drove some support from Clackamas County and grants through Clackamas County and other resources that we found throughout the state to help save the house.
Wow, that's incredible. I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
So tell us what, for those of you that may not know about the Ermatinger house, tell us what famous event took place in that house, or is said to have taken place in that house.
We can only say it's said. Basically, Ermatinger worked for the Hudson Bay Company, and Ermatinger worked for Dr. McLaughlin. So there's a strong connection with the McLaughlin house, obviously, with Fort Vancouver, and the Ermatinger house predates the McLaughlin house. It's a Hudson Bay Company house, and Francis wasn't there very long, so the history associated with the house and Francis Ermatinger is very short-lived. Majority of the history of the house is just the stories of the people that lived there for many, many decades. People lived in the house all the way up into the 1980s when it was moved to its current site, and it was a rooming house in early history. Where people rented out rooms coming into town. So understanding who the individual spirits or ghosts are in the house is very difficult, because we know that hundreds of people have lived in that house over time. And it's just been an interesting place to be a part of and tell the stories. But again, it's one of those places that's a little bit of a mystery. The coin toss to name the city of Portland, which no one can prove emphatically that it was done in the Ermatinger house, but here's what we know. When you go to the Oregon Historical Society and ask about the coin toss, they almost always, every person that I asked, said, well, it happened in a house in Oregon City. And they won't say which house. So then you look at Oregon City in the 1840s. You know, there was a fair amount of houses there, but the houses that were saved were the Ermatinger house, Barclay house, McLaughlin house. Barclay house is about 1850. McLaughlin house is about 1845, 46. The Ermatinger house a few years before that. So in timing, in terms of where this coin toss might have taken place, all kind of points back to the Ermatinger house, just because we know that that's the only house that really exists today that it could have been associated with. Found some references to the coin toss taking place in a house owned by the Wilson family. Well, the Ermatinger house became the Wilsons' boarding house or the Wilsons' rooming house. So we're still looking for any documents that really prove it, but it's become kind of common knowledge that that's where it took place. So it's it's something that we tried to use as leverage to get funding from the city of Portland, and didn't completely work. The city of Portland had made a commitment to helping with the house when Sam Adams was mayor, and then when he chose not to rerun, that all kind of went away. So I'm still waiting. And I think there's still some work that needs to be done in the interior of the house, so we'll be trying to ask the city of Portland for money at some point.
All right. All right, so Mr. Jeff Davis, tell us a little bit about yourself. And
Well, after all of these other people's biographies, I kind of, I'm actually share some commonality with just about everybody else who's already spoken. And I've been writing and researching books on the paranormal since the late 1990s, so nigh on to 20 years. And so I've kind of seen the rise of interest in the paranormal from the 1990s television shows and radio shows on the paranormal, where you come in, you have somebody tell their story, there's a reenactment, there's a closing, and those were paranormal stories. Haunted History, famous for that. And now we're in this whole reality show, and how many of you people believe reality TV shows are actually real? I don't see any hands coming up. And so, you know, we've all of us have worked with these reality shows, and the people are very serious about what they're doing, yet somehow TV production values kind of get in the way. And so this skepticism on the part of the public about, is the paranormal real or is it just hype? And so in recent years, and I've talked to Rocky about this, and I've talked to you about this, and other people, is we can't prove ghosts exist. Neither can we prove they don't exist. And so you have physicists claiming there are no such things as ghosts, yet physicists are willing to speculate that we are actually a hologram on the edge of the universe. and that doesn't get people laughing, right? And so, I continue working and researching and writing, and what I'm trying to do now is to discuss is correlation versus causation. If you can't prove ghosts exist, then let's not even argue about causation. This historic event caused the haunting. So instead, let's look at correlation, folklore, and history. You have a story of a haunt. You have a ghost story. You have people nowadays having things happen, like in the Shanghai tunnels or the Ermitinger house. So let's look back historically and see if there's any parallel historic incident that might well have caused this. So that's correlation. And right now I'm working on a book on haunted Vancouver, USA. And fortunately, a lot of newspaper archives are in digits now. You can surf the web and read newspapers from the 1870s. And so I'm finding tremendous numbers of correlations with modern ghost haunt stories that you go back far enough and whoop, there's the blip.
Wow. And how many books have you written thus far?
I've written and contributed.
That are published?
I've got 3 that haven't been published. Thanks for reminding me. I have my own self-publishing. I've probably published or revised and republished a dozen books. My 2 most famous books were written for Barnes & Noble, essentially, in their Weird Washington and Weird Oregon. And my most recent book is not a paranormal book. It's a history book called Custer's Other Brother-in-Law, and I published kind of a journal of orders kept by his brother-in-law, Frederick Calhoun.
Wow.
Very cool.
Wow. The amount of research that goes into your books. I mean, I had lunch with you not that long ago, and you brought a lot of the stuff that you've researched. I mean, which was, I'm sure, just a hair of a fraction of it, and it's incredible. A lot of reading, a lot of research.
Right. The one that really you and I talked about the most was, of course, guardhouse stories from Fort Vancouver. And the really most interesting one, if I can talk about it, is thinking like it's an urban legend. My girlfriend and I were parking to have a snog in the parking lot outside the Grant House, and we're facing the parade ground, and there's this Army sentry with a rifle who comes up and tells us, "Halt, who goes there?" And that sounds so much like an urban legend, you know, and I treated it as such until I started researching these back files and found out that in the late 1800s, the guardhouse for the Vancouver barracks was on the edge of the parade ground, and at least one incident, a private had been punished. He'd been in the guardhouse, and then at the end of his punishment for that, they punished him again by making him a guard. And so he came in at the end of his guard shift, still with his weapon, went into the back of the guardhouse, took off his shoe, put the rifle down, and with his big toe, pulled the trigger and killed himself.
Wow.
And so again, this is not causation necessarily, but it's kind of a correlation. We have the modern story, and now we have historic incidents that seem to be very similar.
Wow. You know, I think between the two of you, I've seen you guys on TV, I don't know how many times. Every time I turn on the channel on the TV, I see Michael Jones. And then I'll text him, I'm like, when did you do this show? And he goes, oh, that was 2007. I'm like, do you even know how many TV shows you've done already?
I don't.
Probably not. And you too.
Yeah.
Dead Files, you know,
Yeah.
most recently.
Yeah,
And,
I filmed an episode with them that'll air next year, and I just had to sign a waiver and things like that. So they're in post-production right now.
Wonderful. All right. All right, Miss June Lundgren. Last but not least.
Yeah. I've been a psychic medium all my life. I grew up with a grandmother who was a psychic medium, and all the women back to the 1600s that I could trace were all psychic mediums. And so since I was a kid, I've been seeing dead people. It's just, I learned from my grandmother to tell the difference between the good and the bad and help people cross that come to me. I'm also a nurse, been a nurse for almost 40 years. And I spent 5 years in the military. That's where I got my nurse's training. I have written 5 books. Most of them are on the paranormal. The first one's called A Medium's Guide to the Paranormal. And then I have Paranormal Encounters, which are my real life paranormal encounters, recounted. And there's Paranormal Encounters 2, and I just finished The Dark Side of the Paranormal, and was released in July. And I also have a children's book out called Petals, Golden Wings.
That's not paranormal.
No. And I am working on 3 more. I do a lot of...
3 more?
3 more, yes, right now.
Now, you have a husband. You have a son.
Yes. I have a
You
full-time
have a
job.
full-time job.
Yeah.
And paranormal team.
In a paranormal team, TV shows, radio shows.
Yeah.
How do you have time to write 3 books? 3 more books? My
I write
gosh.
them all at the same time, actually.
Wow.
That
And
gives a new meaning to multitask.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've always,
toe
I've
and the
always
fingers
been,
While you're cooking dinner, right, and doing laundry.
I've always done that.
Oh.
I always can listen to the radio, watch TV, and read a book at the same time and know what's going on with all 3. But that's just the way I am. I think it's because I always feel there's never enough time in this lifetime to get everything done.
Yeah.
And I died back in 1988 and came back. I was in a motorcycle accident. And since then, it's, things have gotten even more hectic, because when I died, they said, they make you review all your lifetimes, and you end up coming back to the core soul, the original soul that you start out with, and, not these other lives that you live. And they told me that my soul belongs to Ariel, the archangel. And I'm like, well, why? Archangels don't come back. And they says, no, she was sent back because she forgot to have compassion for man. She didn't have any sympathy, any compassion, any love of man at all. She had been on the other side too long. And her favorite thing is killing demons. And that was her entire goal up in heaven, was to get rid of demons.
Now, is this what was told to you before
Yeah.
you came back?
Yeah, that was told to me.
And what was your thoughts, if you
I
can
thought,
remember?
no, it's like, right, sure, whatever. And so when I came back, I put it away from me because I couldn't deal with it for a while. It took me a few years to learn to deal with it and accept that's what it was. Because I started thinking, over the years, I always wondered why negatives would run away from me. And I thought it was just because, I'm a light worker. Never occurred to me that it was anything else. When I was little, my grandmother protected me, so when she crossed. So it's like, then I started adding up everything, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I know things that most people don't know. and I have the ability to remove a demon in about 60 seconds.
Wow.
Which is almost unheard of.
Mm.
So, and Michael, the archangel, is always with me. Tonight he's up on the ladder again, his favorite place. But when he's earthbound with me, you know, he helps me to remove the demons. And it's a partnership. I mean, I don't like doing it, but God told me, you know, this is something that you have to do. This is your job. So suck it up and do it. So I do. But I love doing the paranormal investigating. I mean, I've always been interested in that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And of course, because it's been going on all my life, and for me, that's normal. You know, it would be odd if there wasn't something going on somewhere.
Right.
You know, it's like, what? But I love that sort of thing, and I love helping people. My first book I wrote, A Medium's Guide to the Paranormal, to empower people to help themselves, to empower people to know the difference between good, bad, or in between, how they could help themselves, how they could communicate with the other side, so that they can empower themselves to talk to their guides and guardians and get the answers that they seek, so they don't have to come out to you or me or Joe Blow. That way, they're empowered. I'm all about teaching people about that.
That's awesome. It sounds like everybody, all you guys have evolved into teaching. I know you and you know, the three of you. I think that's awesome. You know, it's funny because, 25, 30 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about the paranormal, and especially on television. Yeah. I know in my house, it wasn't hush-hush, but it wasn't something that we all talked about. Yeah. When I had my first paranormal experience at 10 years old, I didn't come home and tell my folks, I saw a ghost, you know. I kept it to myself for the longest time, trying to, you know, figure it out in my head.
It wasn't done. It's like you didn't talk about that sort of thing. When my grandmother was young, you know, because the women in the family all got the gift, you know, her mother told her, listen, you can't tell anybody about this. You can't let anybody know about this because they'll put you in the loony bin. You know, it was hush-hush in the family. Only the family knew about it. So she couldn't say anything to anybody. Even though she would see these ghosts or whatever, she could not say anything. She could not let anybody know that she had this ability. Sure. Because they used to put them, when you hear voices, they'd put you in the loony bin, you know? Yeah. She did not want to go there.
I don't blame her. So what about you guys? You guys have any questions? Anybody want to ask any questions at this time? Anybody? Anyone? Raise your hand. No? We have a lovely looking audience, though. Do you mind if we just stare at you for a bit? We can just stare at you for a while.
No pressure.
All right, that's okay.
No
yeah, no pressure with the cameras turning on you or anything. Yes, please.
Do you charge for tours, and how much do you charge?
Oh, see, I'm not locked in like you guys.
Yeah.
First, okay. So tell us who you are first.
I'm Teresa Cleve, and I'm a medium.
And you know that guy sitting next to me, right?
Yeah, I know him really well.
Awesome. And then you guys do something together, and it's coming up, what, the 30th of this month?
Yes, we're going to be appearing at the Twilight Theater on the 30th for a gallery reading.
Awesome.
And it's everybody's encouraged to wear costumes. Ooh. And we're going to have a really fun time. It's going to be a very spooktacular night.
Spooktacular, I like that.
Yes.
Very cool.
But my question is for the tours. I haven't been on any of them, but I was wondering, you know, if there's a charge for them, and how often they are, that kind of thing.
Rocky, Michael?
Yeah, my tours are mainly summer because I'm a school teacher, so I do tours in the weekends off and on in the summer, and then in the fall through Halloween night. And the tour tickets for my tours are $15 for adults and $12 for children 13 and under. Now,
for those that can go online and check it out, what is your website?
nwghosttours.com or northwestghosttours.com.
And we'll flash that on the screen for the TV show as well. So, Michael?
Yeah, our tours, well, The regular standard tour is 12 and up is $13, under 12 is $8. Our Halloween ghost tours are $17, 12 and up, and under 12 is 11. Then we have just for the Halloween season, a special 9 o'clock tour that goes into a section of the underground. I say sections, not one. That we don't allow people to go into because we're still working on it. It's going to be another year before it's really open for regular tours. But that is a $26 tour. And that's where we get the most, I would say, serious people. They just really get into it, and especially going into an area that we don't usually allow people to go into. But it's an area that I've had volunteers quit and couldn't handle it because of what has happened there.
I heard a lot of stories when I went down there for the first time, and the only time I've been down there, and oh my gosh. The feeling down there is different, though, I have to say, than the rest of the tunnels. The rest of the tunnels is more oppressive, like I said, but this I didn't feel as much. I felt like there was more activity. I don't know, so.
What about accessibility?
Accessibility? What about the accessibility?
There's, in the regular sections that the four buildings into, it's 10 steps down and 10 steps up. The new section is 13 steps down and 13 steps up.
It's treacherous when you, from the street where Hobos is, leading down. It's pretty steep going down there.
The new area is very different, but the spirits seem to cross over and go into that new section.
Now, what about the walking tours that you're doing?
I do walking tours through the neighborhood, so it's mostly wheelchair accessible, and I can adapt the tours to that.
Awesome.
What about Jeff's walk?
Yeah.
Jeff, that's right.
Well,
tell us a little bit about last night, what you did last night as well.
Okay, I've actually want to talk about two different walks. One is I do, upon request, free walks to the Vancouver Barracks Post Cemetery. This is not a ghost walk. It is a historical walk. We try and do something sometimes like talking tombstones. So there are 4 Medal of Honor recipients buried there, and people moved from other grave sites. So the graves actually span the 1850s to the present day. And it's accessible. You're walking, or if you're in a chair, on grass. So that's one of the considerations. But it's free as a volunteer service. And if anyone's interested, they can email me at president@vbma.us. president@vbma.us, and set up a tour. What you were talking about, part of the reason I'm not really moving that fast is we had a fundraiser for the VBMA. That stands for Vancouver Barracks Military Association, and this supports our historic preservation efforts. And mixed in with that, I am tied to the Vancouver Barracks, and on the 31st at least, I will be doing Spirit Tales of Officers Row, which is at the barracks, and I hope very soon to get a good link for this. But if people email me at president@vbma.us, I can get back with people when we get an electronic registration, and that will be on grass as well as pavement, gentle slopes. So hopefully that would be accessible. I think this is a charity event. I think they're asking for $10 a person. So
Awesome.
Thank you for letting me interject.
Yeah, absolutely. And incidentally, the first time I met Jeff was my sister called me up, and I'd been a fan of yours because I'd read a couple of your books and wanted to meet you, wanted to have you on my show when I first started my show. Couldn't get an email back from the guy. Some people.
Sorry, I was in Afghanistan at the time.
And my sister said, "Oh, he's doing a walking tour in Vancouver, a paranormal tour. You want to go?" Yeah. So we went, and that's how I met him, and the rest is history. But no, it was a great tour. I really enjoyed it. And these two guys I haven't been on your tour yet, so I'm not knocking you.
Anytime.
But these two guys, as far as tours go, my gosh, the amount of knowledge that these two gentlemen have, history-wise, my gosh, makes the tour just worth it. So I encourage you to go on these tours, get involved, and that's
Rocky's
another
too.
thing. What's that?
I've been on
Rocky's?
his.
Yeah.
Very knowledgeable.
Yeah, so have I. Yeah.
Well, and I encourage people to get out and learn about the history. You know, of course, those of us that are interested in paranormal, that's great and all, but, go and learn about the history, especially in our own backyard and our neighbors. And so it takes people to stand up, kind of like what you've done and the rest of you, and preserve history, living history. And I think it's important. So were you going to say something? You looked like you were going to say something, or maybe my psychic abilities were kicking in, I don't know.
No, Michael's just talking, that's all.
Okay.
What is he saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there was another, shall we say, not nice one came in, and so he took care of it.
So we have our own bodyguard, basically.
Yes, he took care of it.
By Michael the Archangel.
Yeah.
All right. That's kind of the best bodyguard you could ask for, I guess. So tell me a little bit. I want to know, what was your first paranormal experience in your entire life? Have you ever had a paranormal experience?
Right?
Use.
The very first,
Use.
I would say, what was one of the first times I went underground
Were you as a child?
as a child? Wasn't the very first time, it was like the third time.
Wow.
And I was pretty scared, but when you're 7 years old and you have this opportunity to go into the underground by yourself, you couldn't really act that scared, because I had to keep it under control, which I think was pretty hard as 7 years old. Yeah. But I was underground, and I thought it was somebody from the hotel. We always went into the hotels because they had the biggest footprint on the block. So that was the best place to go. And I'm underground, and I think that, oh my God, somebody has followed me down, maybe the desk clerk. Because my foster brother's dad, Dewey Kirkpatrick, he lived downtown 6 months out of the year. And he actually would sneak me into these hotels that he actually had a room in. So he had a right to be there. But he'd sneak me past the desk clerk. I'd go underground and explore, and then I would sneak back up. But I thought, oh my God, somebody has followed me down, like the desk clerk, and I'm going to get in big trouble here. Well, then I realized that what I saw was this shadow of this, what I thought was a person, but I realized this person looked like a cape, and he was wearing a top hat.
Wow.
And I hid in some wooden boxes, and I heard this. It was walking. It was just like a person walking, and went into this tunnel, and I waited until it stopped. It was very quiet. I snuck back up, and Dewey was in the lobby waiting for me like he always did. I said, Dewey, what happened to that desk clerk? He said, desk clerk is over there. He never left.
Wow.
I said, there was a man with a hat and a cape. And it really scared me, and it really made me realize that I'm vulnerable. But I was hooked. That was the first time. And I've never thought about that for many years till you just asked the question. And I'm actually a little bit shaking now.
Wow.
Because I'm feeling it, how I was back then. And whoa, yeah.
Is it normal for the lights to blink?
No.
Okay.
I was waiting for somebody to point that out. And then Tish, how about yourself?
Well, I can relate with June because my mother and I kept the secret when I was about 5, and that it wasn't good to tell anybody in the family. And but I was ultra sensitive, cried at the drop of a hat, felt everybody's stuff. And so when I would ask her about who's at the end of my bed, thinking someone had come to visit. I grew up in the country, and she goes, nobody, and it was a great-grandmother that I never knew was there. And so anyway, we just kind of kept that quiet. But I remember during the Vietnam War, one of my brother's best friends had gone in first. And I went to my mom like 3 days prior to the telegram arriving, saying he came to visit me and he died. And definitely don't tell anybody. And sure enough, 3 days later, the family gets the telegram.
Wow.
And that was when I was like, I don't want to do this.
How old were you?
I was 13.
Wow.
And no, I didn't want to be involved in that anymore. And but Spirit has it that you have things to do here. You make a contract with the universe. And so, learning about it, learning how to maneuver it, I think, you know, all these people here are gifted to assist people here to know how to manage your feelings and emotions and to determine what's yours and what's theirs. And with the work that I do, I'm getting a number of people coming in, as I mentioned to Seth, that have been diagnosed bipolar. And I know that they're not. They're empaths, but they are unaware of that. So if any of you have issues or feelings or dreams, contact any of us. We are here to assist and help you walk through that. You're not crazy, just letting you know. So anyway.
That's awesome. I like that advice. What about you, Seth?
I don't remember any one instance, but I do remember this one house that we lived on Congress Street in Wisconsin. There was, when it was time to go to bed and the lights would go out, I don't think it was just a kid thing where you're scared of the dark. Everything kind of felt alive. I remember bits and pieces of that, and I remember my mom didn't get much sleep because I would call her in. And then I got night lights, so that helped a lot. But I had a lot of dreams about the basement, and we had our pantry down there, and Mom would say, go down and get such and such cans, and I would run down, run back up, because it was just creepy. But it wasn't just because of a basement, because when we moved to another house, I was fine in the basement, so it was just interesting. But I can't remember one but one was cool, was I do remember, now I thought it was imaginary, that I was going on an imaginary date with this tall blonde, and I could see her, and I had just learned how to tie my shoes. I was getting to tie my shoes, but I wasn't perfect at it, and she'd help me. I remember getting down there and like talking about the bunny rabbit thing, and we were so excited, me and this imaginary friend, which I think she was just invisible.
Right.
So I do remember that. And then Mr. McGovernment, that's the guy that came to dinner.
Mr. McGovernment?
That's what I named him at the time, because of because of McGovern at the time.
I would love to have visited your house.
My mom was awesome about it.
That is so cool. What about you?
I think my first experience was at the Ermatinger house, and I was closing the house up for the day, and a volunteer had left out the back of the house, and I had to walk past the dining room table in the dining room, and there's a space between the dining room table and the wall of about maybe 4 feet, and that's the center pathway in the center of the house. So had to walk past that to get outside and take a sign down to close up the house. And when I came back in to the house, I got to the doorway of the dining room, and the chair that was at the head of the table was now sitting in the center of that pathway that I just walked through. It had moved about 1.5 feet, and I just stood there in the doorway looking at the chair for what seemed a very, very long time, trying to figure out how I had walked through it, around it, how it had moved. I couldn't figure it out, and that's when I pushed the chair in and ran out of the house. And so those things happened continually as I continued to work there, but that was, I think, my first experience. And it was scary at the moment, but later on, I remember growing up having conversations and watching, Unsolved Mysteries and all these weird shows, and my sister would hear the music come on to Unsolved Mysteries and run and hide in the room. and I would watch these shows, and we all grow up watching haunted movies or scary movies and say, they come back into the house and the furniture's all changed, and you're like, why would you stay there? What are you, crazy? And then, that just never made sense to me. And then when it happened to me, yeah, it did scare me, and I did run out of the house, and later on, when you process it, realize that, okay, they weren't trying to scare me, he was just trying to let me know he was there. And that I need to tell their story, and I need to be understanding of the fact that this is their place. And so then I felt fine about it, and I went back into the house, and I continued to do so.
Wow. Mr. Jeff?
It's hard to say, because I'm one of these people who believes the paranormal is active more so in the day than in the night. So what's to say I have not interacted with a spirit that I didn't perceive as being a spirit? So, but having said that, probably the most interesting and earliest thing that happened is when I was working on my first book, I managed to persuade a gentleman named Chuck Hughes to allow me into the upper floor of the White Eagle Saloon. And if anyone stayed at the White Eagle Saloon now, it didn't look like that when Chuck Hughes
I was
owned
propositioned by a prostitute there.
Good to know. Good to know.
And almost every single ghostly prostitute is nicknamed Rose, or Petunia, or Tulip, or something like that. But I don't think anything paranormal happened there. But I'll tell you, you stand in the upper floor of one of Portland's most haunted buildings, alone with the stories that predated me. And it was an interesting experience, especially when the camcorder started like strobing as you're looking through the viewfinder. Remember the old-fashioned camcorders? You had a little viewfinder this big, and so it started strobing, and then I figured out it was because at the very end of the hallway there was some light. But when it happens to you again, it's like, oh. So that's probably the first and most exciting thing.
No, really, he had one of those cameras that
Feels like it.
Now, getting back to your story, the prostitute.
Kristen and my girlfriend, we were there, and there was a tap on my shoulder. Do you guys remember that? I don't remember. Did she say how much she was? I think but I don't remember.
I just know you turned beet red.
This is not a public service announcement.
Yeah.
So, moving on to June. I'm sweating again.
I've always seen souls, spirits all the time. But my first really ghost was when I was about 9 years old. And I went to outdoor school. I was in 6th grade. And the first night I was there, I had a dream that my grandfather died. And, woke up crying. Didn't say anything about it. And that was in like April. And then September he died.
Wow.
And I was sitting, my grandfather had just died, and they had taken away his body. And I was sitting at the kitchen table, which you have a direct sight to the bathroom. And my cousin's husband was there, and he decided to go into the bathroom. My grandfather never liked him. I always thought there was something strange about him. So as I'm watching the door close, I see this huge old-fashioned chest of drawers being pushed over in front of the door. And my grandpa winked at me. When I saw my grandpa do it, he winked at me and like, and I didn't say, I just smiled and didn't say anything. And then suddenly, he's trying to get out of the bathroom and he can't get out of the bathroom, and everybody starts running, and I just ignore it. Later, I told my grandma what had happened. She goes, "Yeah, he never liked Bob in the first place." And then he crossed right after that, but it was funny. Yeah.
Well, my first experience was I was 10 years old. I'd spent the night at a friend's house who lived a few doors down from us. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and during the night, now their house had the same layout on the inside as my house, so I knew my way around their house with my eyes closed, basically. And during the night, got up, had to go to the restroom, went to turn off the light, opened the door to the restroom to go back to the bedroom, and excuse me, and just before I turned the light off, now this was happening like this, got my hand on the door, got my hand on the light. I'm not going to turn it off till I open the door, of course. And right before I turned the light off, I opened the door, and this woman walked right past me. Every time I tell this story, I can still feel the air of the woman that passed. And the only way I can describe it is she had no face. It was like skin pulled over a skull. It was obviously the most terrifying thing at 10 years old. She had a long gown, long hair. His mom, my friend's mom, did not look like that, and she had a face. So I knew it wasn't her. So I take off running, and of course, like I said, I knew my way around the house, but there was no lights on. But all of a sudden, I can see. Well, I looked down the hallway, and the curtains were open all of a sudden. And the moon was shining so bright that it was shining all the way to the end of the hallway to his parents' room, which the door was closed. So that freaked me out even more. And I took off running, run, and jump in his bed. I'm leaped through the air, and as soon as I hit the bed, oh my gosh, he had a little dog. His dog had jumped in the bed while I was in the bathroom. I had to go again. So I figured, no, I'm not going back. So it was crazy, though. I mean, that was the, sorry.
Seth has to go to the bathroom?
So, yeah, that was so that was my first paranormal experience, and that's really what led to my fascination with paranormal. I thought, my gosh, what was that? As I got older and wasn't as terrified anymore, what happened? What was that? And then throughout my life, my grandfather died when I was 14. I was very, 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 very close to my grandfather. He was my best friend. And I mean, I spent all the time with him, and he and I went on a trip together 2 days before he died. And when we came, and I asked him, I said, what's wrong with you? And he said, oh, I think I have the flu. And I said, oh, okay. Well, we were listening to Bing Crosby over the radio, and I said, well, is he still alive? And my grandfather said no. Now, I held this guilt, just bear with me a second. I held this guilt for a very long time. I was a child. And I said, well, when do you think you're going to die? 2 days later, he was dead. And I, for the longest time, up until adulthood, really, I held that guilt that I killed him. I brought it up, I threw it out in the universe, and then it killed him. It's my fault. And when he died, we were at the hospital all day. It was New Year's Eve, 1984. And I remember my uncle wanted to run to the car for something, and so he asked my sister and I to go with him. We did. We went to the car just to kind of get out of the room, and because all of our family was up there, and come back, and there was a complete silence in the elevator. The three of us didn't say one word to each other. And we get up there, the doors open up, and people are crying. We knew, obviously. And anyway, so I rode home with my uncle to keep him company. My dad was the first time I'd ever seen him cry, but I was riding with my uncle, and I thought, okay, Grandpa is what I called him. If you can hear me, and I'm thinking this in my head, right? If you can hear me, give me a sign. Let me know that you're still here with me and that you can hear what I'm saying to you. And all of a sudden, the window rolled up. And I go like this, and I mean, I was scared to death, of course. And I looked at my uncle and I said, oh my God. And he said, what's wrong with you? And I said, well, I was just talking to Grandpa in my head. And I told him that if he could hear me to do something. And all of a sudden, the window rolled up. And he goes, that was me. It was getting cold in here. I'm like, oh.
But at that moment,
Yeah.
I wonder maybe he was influenced.
I've always wondered that, to be honest. I do believe that he comes around quite often. And so anyways, so do you guys have any questions? Do you have any stories you'd like to share? I'd love to hear somebody's story. Kristen, not to pick anybody out.
Which story would you like to hear?
Oh, you just pick one out of the encyclopedia.
The closet.
Someone else can have a turn.
All right. Does anybody have a story? Anybody want to say something or ask a question?
I have a question of the audience.
Okay, that would be awesome.
Why are you here? Why did you come?
Ooh, I paid
We
them.
like you.
No, that's a cop-out. Some of you, why did you come? What did you anticipate or want to hear or hope to hear? Come on.
We all hope to hear about our relatives that have passed. That's why we're all here, obviously.
Okay,
Or pets, or friends, or anything else.
okay.
When you throw out the word psychic or psychic medium, that's the first thing that people say. I want to know. I want to know about my family. I want to know about my friends. I want to know.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm loud enough. I don't. We all want to know everything. You know?
Is that thing even on?
It's not on at all. It's not on.
It's on.
It's on for television.
Really?
It's on for
Okay.
television, just not in here.
So what information can you tell us? Are you picking anything up?
Actually, I wasn't in the, well, for me, I got to be in the zone, and this was more of an output, like it wasn't presented as a reading. So, and people, like I've had people, you know, just meet, I hear you're a psychic, read me. And it's like, what do you do for a living? I clean carpets. Well, can you go clean my carpet right now? So, no offense, but it you know, I think we're connected. Most of us are connected all the time, but to really get into a focused zone, for me, I need to prepare, you know.
Yeah, you have to
Which
get
is
in the
fair
zone.
enough, honestly. I mean, that's like working at 7-Eleven and saying, pour me a Slurpee right now.
Yeah.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
I gotta go get it. I get it.
And you got to explain that because it's hard to really know. Because I would do the same thing. Like if I didn't understand it, I would think, well, read me, you know. But yeah.
Does anybody up there feel anything? Anybody getting anything?
Well, we know that the room is full,
Yes.
and we know that you, I don't know, the gentleman over Kristen's shoulder has some stuff going on. But I'd like to talk to you later. But I remember, I feel like the same with Seth, sometimes we just get set up.
Yeah.
And I remember being at Aaron's house one day.
I remember that too, and it was right around this time of year, last year. And I remember a certain question that was thrown out, and the look on your face said it all. But you are wonderful. I remember that date very well.
Thank you. Thank you. But I felt.
Talk about being set up.
Talk about being set up. And may I elucidate on
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
just a moment?
I wasn't the one that asked the question, was
No, you were
Okay.
not the one who asked the question. But I was at Aaron's house, met his mom and dad and sister and the boys, and everybody was around there. And I thought I was only going to meet 2 people, but everyone's around the table.
This is a place setting for 12.
Yeah, it was like, oh, okay, there's a lot of energy in here. And so going around the table was able to give some snippets, but we got to Aaron's sister, Julia. And she says, I've had 2 psychics here, and they've told me exactly who this famous person is, and I want you to tell me who it is.
Oh,
And
I
I'm
remember
like,
that.
yeah, And I said, I can't do that. And her jaw just dropped. But as soon as I said, I can't do that, then the videotape ran through all these movie stars and people, famous, whatever, and then all of a sudden the tape stopped. And I said, I'm only going to say Michael Jackson, and bam, it's like she fell out of the chair, because that's exactly who it was. But that doesn't happen often, because you do have to get in the zone, and we read energies, and we read people, and we want to honor you and really give you the time and the attention, and to really integrate your body, mind, and spirit with what we do for you. So it's kind of hard to be put on the spot.
That's well put. But sometimes it does happen. It's
Sometimes.
just Voodoo Donuts. We were outside and people are asking for money, and then there was this one lady, and I saw a dog with her, and I said to my girlfriend, I see a dog, and she said, tell her. And I felt it. Like I'd ask myself in public, if I ever get anything, like automatically I ask myself at least 3 times, is this the highest, greatest good to tell this person? And I got yes 3 times. And so I let her know. And if anybody's really loving animals, close your ears, because she said that the reason she was homeless is she ran away from her boyfriend who had just killed the dog. So it was like really important. So like if it's the moment and it's just something that we're moved to tell, then I think it's my responsibility then to question myself on it and then give the information and trust.
That's so true. And we have a responsibility, and like I said, we're in a contract. And just because we may know something doesn't give us the right to share it. We have to get clear instruction whether to give you that information or not.
It's like when I do a reading, you know, I liken Teresa Caputo, okay? Long Island medium drives me crazy because she's like, I only ask for the good. I don't want to hear anything negative. But you know, I tell people when they come to me for a reading, I'm going to tell you everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, if you don't want to hear it, then I'm not the person for you. Go somewhere else. I said, because if I'm given something negative, it's to prevent it from happening, or to warn you, or to help someone make amends or reparation. I said, I don't do it just to do it. I had a friend of mine I was working with, and she says, you know, I just found out my aunt who raised me has terminal cancer. And I don't know how long she's going to be. I'm worried maybe I should take off next week to be with her, or maybe at the end of the month. And I looked at her and I said, you need to take off next week because she's going to be gone by the end of the week. So she took that week off, and she died that Sunday. And I tell him, I asked God, I said, why did you do that to me? And he says, because it was for the greater good. She could spend that time with the woman that raised her, you know, and not have any regrets and say whatever she needed to say. And so I learned, you know, over the years that that's the reason I'm given something like that, is for the greater good of the person. Both of them, in this case, both of them.
I agree with that too. Like when we're given, like when we're focused reading and something comes, I'm a big believer in that too. I must be getting it for some reason. But when it's in, you know, public like that, I question it more. But yeah, it's I don't keep things from people either in readings and not really sugarcoat. But I'm not real, you know, knife in the heart like, but I mean, I say it with tact, you know what I'm saying?
Sure. You have to be discreet.
Yeah.
You know, you have to learn over the years, you know, to make it in such a way that it's not like, you know, hugely traumatic to them. You know.
And do you guys feel like you're doing this? You have to do this. You mentioned that. This is something you have to do, Michael. You were chosen, I believe, to tell their story from down in the tunnels. No matter how it's done, which is very, very wonderfully done, by the way, and respectfully done. Do you all feel like you were chosen to do what you do? I mean, I know you do, but what about you, Rocky, as far as telling the story of the history of Oregon City? And then you're going above and beyond by doing the Oregon Ghost Conference, but do you feel like you were chosen for this?
I do a little bit. I feel that I'm just passionate about the place and passionate about the things that I'm talking about. When you are connected to the history in a particular place so much, like Michael is with the underground and Jeff is with many, many places, those places become more than just historic places. And when I was working with the Ermitinger House trying to tell people the importance of why it is to save it, you don't fully tell them why. And you can't really explain it. You just know that you have a connection with a place, and the connection with the place is so important that you have to just commit time to being there and telling its story and telling people whatever you can about the place. And you know, that evolves into other places beyond that core place that you're working. But it's definitely a passion. It's definitely something that I think everyone up here are extremely busy people. We make choices about what places we spend time with and what, what events that we do, what things we do. We wouldn't be doing it if we didn't feel that there was some purpose in doing it. I don't know if that means I was chosen or I chose myself. I don't know. But I know that I'm doing it for a reason, and I don't plan on ever stopping.
That's awesome. What about you, Jeff? Feel like you were chosen to tell the story the way you do?
How about this as an easy answer? Yes and no.
Okay.
What I believe in is I believe there are higher powers, whatever anyone wants to call them. It could also be random chance, fate. I also believe tremendously in human free will. So as we do things, as we go about our business, do we see an opportunity? Does an opportunity seem to call to us? But ultimately, we choose to do it. You could try and shut off your abilities and live in a hole and maybe take your medicine, whatever they prescribe for your personality disorders, but you choose not to. Same thing. Well, and that's how you'd be diagnosed.
Right.
But same thing though. All of us could be doing more mundane history if we chose to.
Sure.
And so it's kind of a convergence, but ultimately all of us choose to do it.
Well, you know, I wanted to have the panel here because I wanted people to see that we're not all defined by, paranormal investigator, talk show host, whatever, author, paranormal investigator, psychic medium, whatever. We're all people, and we believe when we have passion for what we do. And I tell you, and I'm going to say this on television, I have never met and been involved with and surrounded myself by more wonderful people, honestly, in my life than these people on this panel. They are true, they are the real deal, and just passionate people, very compassionate. The friendliest, most wonderful people I've ever really surrounded myself by, and so thank you, I appreciate that. You guys have changed my life in a lot of ways, and you may not know it, so you do now, and so does everybody else, so, so I appreciate that. So we only have a few minutes left. Does anybody have at least one question that they wanted to ask? If not, then we're going to quickly move. Yes, sir. Go ahead and come on up to the mic. Tell us who you are. Ask your question.
Hello, my name's Kenny Freund. I have a question for Michael. Michael, do you do just the Shanghai tunnels, or is there other properties that you do events at throughout the year?
We also have the Oregon Country Settlement on Mount Hood, which is a living history village, also nicknamed the Haunted Village. It was an old logging camp right on the Oregon Trail. We've been restoring that, and we have 18 acres of land that we've preserved for future generations. When we're gone, hopefully that will be there for other people to learn from. It's a very unique property. Unfortunately, change is catching up with Mount Hood, and things are disappearing, and on that property is where you can see things today that you can't see anyplace else, sadly. It should be all over the place, but it's not. And yeah, it's a very unique place.
It is. It's truly amazing, and it's actually part of the original Barlow Trail, which to me, to be in that village, which I have spent time there, it's absolutely amazing to see the living history there. Is there anything that you guys would like, one more thing that you'd like to quickly add?
The interesting connection with our living history village to the Shanghai tunnels is the people that built the Shanghai tunnels came over the Oregon Trail and they camped on that property that we have. So that's a great tie-in.
Oh, that's awesome. Tish, what would you like to say?
I would like to say to everyone in the audience that your third eye can be developed. All of you have a gift, and we're responsible. So don't ignore it, develop it.
Awesome.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Imagine that.
No, really. Well, because people sometimes, whether maybe their soul had chose it and they're trying to ignore it, I know a lot of people, it just keeps scratching and then crawling its way out until it's acknowledged. And then people can choose to actually turn it off a little bit more if they first at least acknowledge it and then decide what to do with it.
Awesome.
So, but yeah, I think everybody has something.
Rocky, one last thing. We got less than a minute.
Okay.
Just want to welcome everyone to come and invite everyone to come to the Oregon Ghost Conference this year in April in Seaside.
Awesome.
Don't be intimidated by thinking you can learn from history.
Sure.
I'm also animal communicator too, living or deceased.
Oh, wow.
I've been talking to a lot of those lately.
And crocodiles?
No crocodiles.
I had a hamster. I had a hamster once, but I've never had a That's cool.
It was cool.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you taking your time out, as well as these wonderful folks on the panel. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Give yourselves a round of applause.
Yes.
And thank you for tuning in to Paranormal Crossings. Until next time, we'll see you again. Happy Halloween.
Halloween.
Yay.
You guys are awesome.
Yes. Thank you, guys.